Happy Monday, folks. How's it going? Some football playoff games. We're going to talk about a little bit of that and in the pre-show. And when we get started, we'll talk about the World Juniors. And, being at the halfway mark, we're also talking about some buyers and sellers in the league. But let's start with the NFL. And I was sort of in and out, and this shows my level of interest in the NFL. When, back in the day, I would watch every minute of every playoff game, and now I'm sort of in and out on these games. Yeah. And all of them, they got close in the fourth quarter, and they got interesting in the fourth quarter, and the tension was there. But the one game I was not watching when the final moments happened was the Philadelphia-Chicago game. I was hunkered down writing something for today, and I was sort of following it on Twitter and following it on like ESPN. And for some reason, I knew that kicker was going to miss the kick. I just knew it.
That's funny. I mean, the sad part is we were watching games, and I think the officiating actually affected every game I watched. But aside from that, with the kick, right, we find out after everybody just starts screaming and making fun of Cody Parkey that some guy on the Eagles did get a fingernail on it. Here's the thing about that, though. Now I am hearing the most ridiculous things like, well, that definitely caused it to miss. You don't know because, A, you don't know. You didn't calculate what the wind is. You didn't calculate how the ball was after it hit the first post and then the second post. It may have changed the direction slightly, but the wind could have corrected it. Hitting the post, it still could have gone through. Like, it's still lucky. The guy didn't block it to the point of, oh, no, it definitely missed because of that. I scoff at that. I'm telling you.
Well, that and the fact that the reason I thought he was going to miss was because he made the kick on the ice kick.
Yeah, I hate that rule.
I do too. And he missed the most kicks in the NFL this year. He missed 10. This conspiracy bull crap about he was a former Eagle.
He missed the second most.
Secret agent
most kicks. Look, also, then they showed the highlights of his hitting the posts and stuff like that. So I mean, it's bad luck. I feel for Bears fans. I kind of have a soft spot for Bears fans. I don't know why. I just do. I don't really care for the team much, but I don't know, something about the Bears. Okay. But that's a little bad luck. No wind. He overcompensated, I think, because if you can, and I think you can, because he was kicking from the left hash mark or the right hash mark, and he went to the left side. Yeah. Right. It was pushed a little bit, but just because I'm a Seahawks fan, and Russ, you make your Pete Carroll comment right now. Get it out of the way.
No. I've only showed the Vinny Testaverde video like twice over the weekend.
Yeah. There's another game that was decided by a kicker. Yeah. And because Janikowski couldn't make the field goal and blew his leg, and they didn't have a kicker, and they wouldn't use Dixon, the punter, who actually probably could kick if you kept him within 30. And they couldn't go with them. And then, I mean, it decided because they didn't. Okay, so this is the thing. I'm a big rugby guy. I love the sport.
460-pound guy, Peter. That hamstring was gonna go.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You know what he looks like? Yeah, when he takes his helmet off. Have you ever seen Janikowski with his helmet on? He basically looks like the bouncer at a pub in Britain.
He looks like Vader the wrestler.
I'll go you one better. Because he was all jovial and happy on the sideline, and I'm like, right before the kick, and he's like, he's not taking warm-ups. He's just standing there waiting for them to let him come out. And I'm like, okay, most kickers are kicking kicking a couple practice kicks beforehand, and he's just standing there looking like freaking King Kong Bundy from the WWF. He
did do a few, though. He did do a few. I saw it earlier, but I mean, he knew his hammy was probably iffy. I mean, this is the thing. And as a Seahawks fan who, flew out from Winnipeg, took his son for his birthday to a Seahawks game last year, and then watched Walsh miss like 12 kicks in one game the week after they beat the Eagles at home. Right. I mean, it was just like this team, they would have been in the playoffs last year if they had a kicker. They made the playoffs this year. They arguably, with a kicker, could have been perhaps 12-4. Not 10-6 this year, just because of a kicker. And then the kicker,
they definitely missed Steven Hauschka because that's the guy.
They missed Hauschka. They just didn't want to pay him.
But I thought two plays, Peter. Two plays that have ruined the sport.
right? And then that literally, that missed field goal changed the whole complexion of the game, because had they made that, then whatchamacallit, Dallas is chasing them for one
Sure.
point. So I mean, you
But
got to
here's
have
the part
someone
about the
who's
referee.
reliable.
There's two things I learned about the referees, Peter. The first one is now it is impossible to fumble in the end zone, because if you're holding the ball out, now this is the interesting thing. If you go to make a catch, and this is the second part of this discussion, but you can't really fumble the ball. You have to have it fully or you don't make the catch, right? But if I'm leaning over in any way, shape, or form to try and even get the nose of the football to just touch what is the perceived white line, even though, again, they don't have any kind of electronic equipment set up, so it's all guesswork, especially if a guy's trying to jump like he did in the Eagles game.
Yeah.
Yesterday, the ball wasn't even in the guy's possession, and they gave him a touchdown. And it's crazy to me. So you can no longer fumble in the end zone. The other play that's crazy is in the Eagles game, there was a ball that the guy catches from the Bears. He takes 2 steps, but the Eagles defender had his hand in there the whole time. So after the 2 steps, they go down and the strip happens, right? But he already had the ball. He already took the 2 steps. Nobody went and recovered the ball.
Yeah, I saw that.
So now the NFL, because they didn't want to be embarrassed, that ball should have gone back to the Bears, because it's like if you fumble out of the end zone, the ball goes back to the original team. No, actually, sorry, the ball goes to the other team if you fumble out of the end zone. But this is on the regular field. If nobody touches the ball, it should go back to the team that had the ball. And what they decided was it wasn't a catch. Yeah. But they were looking at it as if it was a fumble on the challenge. So it's like,
well, it's
challenge something that's not a catch.
It's that whole football move thing. It's like, okay, he takes 2 strides, he has control of the ball, and then all of a sudden the ball comes loose, and that's not a football move. Well, last time I looked, if you're carrying the ball and you take 2 strides, that's a football move. That's what's so idiotic about the NFL.
It should have been a catch and a fumble, and because nobody recovered the fumble, the Bears should have had the ball there.
Well, what about the play in the Chargers-Ravens game where the running back dives for the goal line?
Yeah.
He's touched by the Ravens player as he's going to the ground. The ground causes the fumble, and it takes them 6 or 7 minutes with replay because the Ravens ran the other way for a touchdown for them to determine that was something pretty clear. Yeah. And by the way, it's 2 things that just made me shake my head. If you think that the people in Vegas don't know what they're doing when it comes to lines, the line on the Dallas-Seattle game was 2. And because Janikowski gets hurt and they're down, what was it? They were down 24, I think 24-7 or 24-6. Yeah, 24-6 or 24. And so it ended up when they went for the 2-point conversion because they didn't trust the kicker, they made it both times and it ends up 2.
Yeah. It's just insane.
That and Russ, I'll tell you right now, there are some quarterbacks who are run first guys who I think can be good in the NFL. You know, Cordell Stewart was limited. Michael Vick had an arm, but he wasn't very accurate. I think Josh Allen in Buffalo is going to be good, even though, he's got some problems with accuracy. Lamar Jackson, I don't know what the hell John Harbaugh was thinking about, but he kept that guy in when he had, 2 first downs in the entire frickin' game, and Joe Flacco is going to get cut because that's the only thing I can think of. They wouldn't go back to him.
If he's going to get cut, he should have gone into that game.
Right.
But here's what I figured out. John Harbaugh basically attached himself to Jackson and said, I'm just going to let it ride because I was going to leave this team midseason anyhow, and somehow we made the playoffs. So
now we got a contract. And now we got a contract extension, so he's staying.
Now he's staying, but I think he just attached himself to that quarterback and said because that got him his contract, he is not going to waver from that, and it was a big mistake.
Yeah, and just to continue the theme of bad officiating. And I know I saw the hue and cry about how bad the officiating is in the NHL last night when the Saint Connor McDavid gets pushed into the boards by I think it was Hampus Lindholm, and he was off balance and he went into the board. He wasn't hurt, he wasn't injured, but he was in what they refer to as a defenseless position, and and there was no call on Lindholm.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I mean, maybe that's a penalty, but believe me, I've seen the opposite happen. There's just there's no consistency is the problem. There really isn't.
Yeah,
it's like
it's getting brutal right now. And
I mean, not brutal to the point of the NFL.
I think Edmonton's a curious case right now because there's a lot of noise that comes out of there. And one of the things that I think is happening in Edmonton right now is that the team is such a bloody mess.
Yeah.
That there's a point where you hit a point where you cannot be negative or dig up more negativity or be any more critical than you have been. And I think even some of the media there, and that goes into people who are bloggers, it goes into their beat guys, it goes into their TV and radio guys. They hit a point where they have to talk about something else other than being critical of the GM, the coach, there's nothing left to be said. And they've run out of ways to say it. So then you start picking on things like this. You get into McDavid's not being treated fair. Like you find things that change your narrative.
All right, I just saw it 3 times though. You want to know my opinion? He got pushed right in the numbers, right into the back wall. It should have been a penalty for sure.
No, I'm not saying it, Russ. I'm not debating the penalty. It's the noise that's starting to happen now. Now,
I don't know how it's not a penalty.
Things that McDavid should draw more penalties. McDavid should get this, right?
And
because there's nothing left to talk about with them.
Hitchcock was the one who started that because he came out and said, well, he's basically pining away and begging for power plays. It's like, okay, I mean, great, but it's not that's not the difference between winning and losing with that team. It's the quality of the actual team.
I just think with the trailing referee, right? I've watched 2 or 3 plays in the last couple of days that they've missed. That's right in front of them.
Right.
So somehow you have to incorporate some sort of review that you could go back and say at a break, hey, you know what? We've caught that. Anaheim, you're in the box. Sorry. We missed that.
Yeah.
But they won't do it.
Right.
Well, I mean, you know what so the one league that is done a very good job of this and federation too is the rugby union, where they actually have a ref on the field. They have the 2 linesmen, okay, run the sidelines, and they have a ref on the field, but they have a ref in the box because there's so much going on in the game. You've got scrums, you've got dirty tackles and stuff. They use this to go back and see, and the ref has a live mic. He doesn't have to go over. He doesn't have to look at anything. The other guy talks to him. What did you see? Okay, this is what happened. Okay, call it a penalty. And they should have a guy up in the box.
Yeah, they have
just go, no, you missed that. And if you want to protect players,
they got a bunch of guys in Toronto, Peter. They could easily radio it back.
Yeah, I agree.
Russ, they
iPad.
They have. I mean, I've seen former. I mean, this is a perfect job for ex-referees. I've seen like Bill McCreary in the press box in Toronto. Yeah. Why isn't he like the eye in the sky? I mean, if they want to centralize everything and keep it in like where they're doing goal reviews in Toronto, I get that. But I also think maybe they don't want to have it remote. Have it on site, because that goes back to, remember the whole thing with Philadelphia and Buffalo in the playoffs, where I think Darcy Regier went at whoever the officials were in the press box after that goal, but that Leclerc goal that was not a goal. If they want to keep everything centralized, that's fine. But you should have the ability to sort of review more than just the goals and more than just the offsides when it comes to sort of a key moment. And I don't know. I mean,
I agree, but we got to get out of this intro, right? This is the longest intro.
Yeah. Sorry.
Fine. That's okay.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, January 7th, 2019.
Happy 2019 all. I'm Peter Tessie up in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with the World Junior, the U.S. and Finland in a rather tight gold medal game, eventually won by the Finns on a late third period goal by Capo Keiko, win 3-2. Russ, I checked in and watched, I'd say half of this game, but mostly during the latter part of it, after Finland got up 2-0, I thought it was pretty much over. And then 2 goals in a minute and 54 seconds, and then Jack Hughes missed on a breakaway, and it was really, really tight up until Keiko scored that goal. I have to say, I thought
that was a hard-working goal. It wasn't like some amazing, highlight reel goal. It was a hard-working goal.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing was, the U.S. were really frustrated by the Finns. I don't know if it was Luukkonen or just the overall play of them. And then all of a sudden, they broke loose in that 2-minute span. And Sasha Clement, I always have a tough time saying his last name. Chmielewski, thank you. He was the best player for the U.S. for, I'd say, the balance of that game, but
yeah.
Jack Hughes got out there, especially on the tying goal. I mean, it was a real. I'm disappointed that the U.S. lost because obviously I would like the U.S. to win, but I thought they played a pretty good game.
I think they did too. I mean, we knew that there were flaws. We knew their defense wasn't great. The part you didn't know was that Jack Hughes was going to play hurt, and I think people who have sort of underestimated his talent based on his last 2 games that he played, he still was a factor, but he was only playing in spot duty. He had an injury that if this were like a regular season for the NTDP, he wouldn't be playing, but it was the World Juniors, so they played him sparingly, and he still had moments. He still did have a breakaway, but you weren't seeing 100% Jack Hughes at that point. I think that's a factor. I do think, again, Caden Primo is a really good goalie. I felt like the game before he had a lot of luck that we talked about, and that game, the luck wasn't there, and Finland just, finished him off with hard work. It's the way it was.
Yeah.
Finland's puck movement was really good. Finland's team defense was really good. I underestimated them for this tournament because I didn't think they'd have enough scoring outside of Keiko and maybe, a few defensemen, but they had just enough. And Pekka Luukkonen had his really bad game, but every other one was really good.
But I thought they were the more experienced of the two teams. When you had Tolvanen and Kupari and
Tolvanen not even scored a goal. So for whoever got on me in the chat room when I said that Finland lacked a sniper, they still lacked a sniper. Tolvanen didn't even score. So I'm not sure where his head's at now. I think that's a guy who now we have to start worrying about his development because now, he's getting bounced around leagues and he doesn't look quite as good even in this tournament as he did a year ago. So that's somebody I would worry about a bit. But end of the day, Finland deserves it. The U.S. still gets a medal. Russia gets a bronze. U.S. gets a silver. Russia gets a bronze. I've always talked up a blue streak about Grigory Denisenko, but I think now the whole world has seen how good he is. So Florida really does have a hell of a pick there. And Heponiemi is another guy from Finland. So, some of these teams, everybody likes to bash Florida, but Florida does had some great prospects in there. And Romanov for the Canadians was the best defenseman in the tournament. That's another guy who really rarely gets talked about. Now he'll start to get talked about. And, even Mike will have to admit this. Things are getting better for the Canadians at the NHL level and on the prospect level.
Oh, no. I mean, I admit, but you look at the NHL level, I still think that's a team that's focused specifically on whether Carey Price is Carey Price or not. I mean, I don't think their defense is deep enough. I don't think they score enough. I think, that Mark Bergevin has done an adequate job at restocking the shelves. I mean, we've talked about Paling. We've talked about, Noah Juleson. I mean, there are prospects in that organization, but I just look at the fact that they haven't addressed center. They've had to move Max Domi up the middle, and that's worked for them so far. But, he's not the prototypical center. Now, they're playing an 18-year-old in Kotkaniemi up the middle. So, I mean, I don't know whether those moves are going to eventually work out. I mean, a kid playing in the NHL at 18, it's always a hit or miss proposition. So we'll talk about that later. But
we will. But again, World Juniors was great.
Yeah.
Margin of error was as ridiculously small as I've ever seen it. And that's why when people ask me to prognosticate it, it's impossible. The closest one I got was the U.S. I had the U.S. coming in for a bronze and they won a silver. Everything else I got obliterated on. I had Russia. I had Russia fourth and then they won a bronze. So that was close.
Right.
But that's it. I mean, I was wrong about a lot of it. But again, when you go back and look at the games, like I always have to go back and look at them because we're going to have a show specifically on this on Sirius XM this week on Hockey Prospect Radio. Margin of error is so ridiculously small.
Yeah. All right.
It's a one and done tournament.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yes.
That these are going to happen. And you know what? It's the one and done aspect that as the talent gap closes between countries, that you don't have a country winning 7 in a row, which isn't good for the tournament. It's great for one country. It's not good for the tournament. It's not good for everyone else. So one and done with the talent gap, it makes it fun. I think I was cheering for the Finns. I didn't have anything against the US. It's just like I like the underdog kind of guys coming through. I don't care if they beat Canada. They were awesome. They're fun. And did you see the looks on those kids' faces when they won?
It was
it was unbelievable. And it's great. It's better for hockey if more spread around. And any Canadian who has the whole "this is our game, we need to be better" rah 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 BS, get lost. It's not our game. It's everyone's game. Right. And off you go.
Wait, Mike, hold the thought for 1 sec, because he talked about one and done. That is like the NFL's new slogan. But the ironic part about it is they never really thought it through, because these NFL games are not one and done. If you're a wild card team, you got to win 4 games to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and can we do away with the na goodbye commercials on the NFL games? My God,
I get what you're saying, but they're picking on the other sports because there's no game 7.
Yeah.
But guess what? If you're a wild card team, the Super Bowl is like your game 7. You've already played other games.
And I would like a World Junior without like controversy. Like first the Maxime Comtois stuff.
It's impossible to have a World Junior without controversy.
Then there was an incident at the end of Sweden's game where one of their players got a double misconduct for I guess expressing some frustration at the end of the game.
Costin slid his helmet at the end of the ceremony and said F you to the crowd, to hecklers. But he's a kid.
Yeah. So I mean, that's
he's a kid though, and that's what people. I think he's still 19 years old. And when people are heckling you and you just lost the tournament of your life, he was crying on the bench. I wish people would really grow up. I really
that was the thing. I felt for those Russian kids. They were all crying. They were all they were heartbroken that they lost a close game to the U.S. They actually, I thought, in some instances outplayed the U.S. The U.S. were very fortunate to win that game. And you saw all these players heartbroken. It's like, they're 18 and 19 years old. I mean, they're not.
It's not a life.
Right. So anyway, okay, let's talk about the league right now at the halfway point. Some teams have played more than 41 games. Some are right at that mark. Some are a few below. But right now we're sort of getting the picture. About, I believe it's 6 weeks out from the trade deadline. There is definitely already sort of a line of demarcation where it comes to buyers and sellers. And let's start with the sellers. I'll point out some specific players here, but let's talk the East first. And in the East, as I pull up
should I give you the most obvious one? I mean, Larry Brooks wrote about it today, and I've been talking about it for a month and a half. Mm-hmm. The fact that Matt Zuccarello and Kevin Hayes are on the Rangers right now makes no sense in any way, shape, or form. Trade them before they get injured. The team is going nowhere. And by the way, if people want to go to Sportsology and read my article about the goalie usage at sportsology.com, Lundqvist has played 30 of 41 games at 36 years old, which is stupid. It doesn't even make sense why they're doing it that way. And he's played back-to-backs. All of this, I get that David Quinn's a new coach. I do. And I get that he wants to win. I do. But he's got a 5-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So you got to look beyond this year a little bit. Get the guys that you want to play, get them playing your way. You can get anybody in the lineup to play your way, but trade some of these guys and get the assets. Even if you're going to re-sign them at some point, get the assets now. You're not going anywhere. Right.
And I mean, you sound like me a couple years ago with the Leafs. It's like they're 6 points ahead of last place in the league.
Right.
It's like, I mean, it benefits you to – you're not going to make the playoffs. Right now the Rangers are 9 points behind the wild card Buffalo and 10 points behind Columbus. So it's over with. It really is over with. It's great that you showed more effort. It's great that some of these players stepped up, but at 17, 17, and 7, you're out of it. So start to make the deal. Now, if they want to wait a little while and sort of generate the price war, the bidding, I get that. Maybe you get more if you get closer to that, but you risk the fact of these guys getting hurt. And what happens if Zuccarello and Hayes get hurt, and then you lose out.
You lose out. And the other part is, again, you don't want Lundqvist to get hurt because he's still got years on his deal. And if they are going to be players in the free agency market, like I think they might be this summer, why are you playing him potentially 60 games this year? It's nuts.
All right, let's touch on a few of the no-brainers.
Yeah.
Peter, Ottawa has lost 8 in a row. They're 15, 23, and 5. They're dead last in the league, 35 points. They've only won 4 games on the or they haven't lost 8 in a row, but they're 1-8-1 in their last 10. But they're, and things are as we expected there. And the thing is they don't have their own first round pick. So, but they also have UFAs that I think if they can't sign them, they've got to move them. I mean, they're in a crap situation.
Okay. Since the draft lottery came in, have we ever seen a GM, a team, organization, and GM put themselves in this kind of situation?
Brian Burke.
What?
Brian Burke.
Yeah.
With the Kessel deal.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
He didn't think that the Leafs were going to be that bad. He thought the defense was going to be good enough.
Yeah.
They make the Kessel deal. They trade 2 first-round picks.
I mentioned that the day the trade was made. I mentioned it because I saw the writing on the wall for that.
I was because the rumors of that deal came out maybe a week before.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so one other time, and that should have been the poster child moment for all GMs to look at this and go, wait a second, we need to look and remember how not to get into this. There's always those are things that it's funny. This is one thing, you know what, who should do it is Elliot Friedman, is get a tour of a GM's office, white out the, blur the stuff that's sensitive, but just what it looks like, how they look and operate, something like that would be fascinating. Because if I'm a GM, and in any business I've run, I like to put things up on walls. I like to have things available for people to see, remind things of what you can't do, what you should do, all those motivation things. And there should be a poster of that trade in every GM's office.
That these guys are riverboat gamblers, Peter. And what happens is when they make the trade, they don't ever imagine that worst result. They never do.
Right.
Yeah. Because hope is never a plan. That should be the fun thing. I should send every GM.
I shouldn't say none of them ever do, because some of them do make the protected trade.
Yeah,
now,
that you know what.
But the thing is, they lottery protected it, but they didn't realize they were going to be this bad 2 years in a row.
2 years in a row.
They should have known at the end of last year this was coming, particularly with the fallout of the Hoffman-Karlsson thing, and then knowing that you were going to get rid of both of them.
Right.
I just think the whole world, maybe except for me and maybe there's maybe 5 other people, should all apologize to Joe Sakic, because at some day soon he's going to be sitting on the top of the mountain with all of this.
Yeah,
and everything.
And that was the argument last year about passing up on the number 4 pick. And I mean, Brady Tkachuk is a great player. I really like him.
I argue that was the move, though, because he will have 2 years in by the time they pick this other player, and Brady Tkachuk is a star. But I think they did okay with it. Let's not kill that.
No. But the thing is that it was hope, Russ. It was hope that they wouldn't be this bad, and you could just see that they were. And now the thing, their dilemma is right now, there have been reports that they're talking to Stone about a contract extension. Yeah. So one of them, I think they have to get signed. The other one, Matt Duchene, I mean, Elliot Friedman reported on the weekend that they're nowhere close. So, I mean, you're probably going to see Matt Duchene dealt before February 25th. And if that happens, I mean, maybe they get a first-round pick back, but it's not going to be anything close to what they're getting.
No, but that may be enough to placate the fans. But again, if we do go back to Brady Tkachuk, if I put him in this year's draft, he's the number 2 pick.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, so Ottawa's. I think we categorize Ottawa as a definite seller. Russ, Philadelphia. I mean,
you're telling me
they've got to be hearing offers.
Hold on, Peter. Hold on, Mike. Are you trying to tell me that Philadelphia are sellers?
I'm going out on a limb and saying yes, they're going to be sellers.
Wow.
Yes,
but they don't believe it. That's the problem.
I'm throwing caution to the wind. They're stupid if they don't.
What does Philadelphia? What do they believe there, anyways?
Honestly, I can't tell you, Peter. But I think what they believe is they were trying to get an identity for the team. They wanted to play rougher. They have done that. They've changed the coach. That's good. Some things have improved. Many things haven't. They haven't moved out any big pieces. Wayne Simmons is still there. James Van Riemsdyk is still fluttering. There's a lot of problems. And so obviously they're not going to make it. And now I think, Mike McKenna aside, that's the only move that Chuck Fletcher has made player-wise.
Yeah.
Now I think it's become even a bigger task, Peter, than when he took over.
Yeah. You know what the interesting
things haven't aged well over the last whatever it is month and a half.
But you know what's so funny? I totally forgot about like the Van Riemsdyk deal. I actually had literally forgotten that he, like, you know, what was it, 6 million a year? 6.5? 7. That was actually a total Flyers move. Like, that's as Flyers move as you can make.
Well, I think Mike actually hit it on the head when he mentioned it. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I thought that the Flyers management were suffering from delusions of grandeur, thinking that after making the playoffs last year, this was the move to add a scorer. They would have him and Simmons on the roster at the same time, that they would step up their offense, that they would make another playoff run, maybe trade Simmons at the deadline if they couldn't get him re-signed, but that this was the move to go the next step, to continue the direction that they had last year. But the problem is everything else fell apart. Their goaltending, they never improved. They never addressed it. And so, I mean, they tried. Van Riemsdyk was the patchwork fix, and patchwork fixes do not work.
Yeah, this is exactly like when you're putting an addition on your house and you do one year and you do one another year, and then you realize it's not matching up well.
Yeah, and the foundation is cracked.
Yeah, and the foundation is cracked. And you're right. When they made that move on paper, it did sort of make sense. But that was only if everything was going to hit exactly right. And nothing hit exactly right. So now you're stuck with James Van Riemsdyk, and that's a tough thing.
Now, the question is, Russ, and just we'll be brief on this because we want to keep going with other teams.
Yeah.
Is there anything other than trading Simmons?
Yes, I think they could trade Gudas if they wanted to, because he's a low salary guy with I think a pretty good market value.
One more year.
Right. So there's pretty good market value on him, and as good as Sanheim has played, I would trade Radko Gudas and I would bring Philippe Myers up, and I would gain the asset or the player, because they can get a player for Gudas. I think I would do that. I would go with that, and then beyond that, no, I mean, there's not much else other than if somebody in the world will have an interest in Neuwirth just to have depth going into the playoffs, fine. I'll take a conditional 7th. I don't care. And if Elliott somehow gets healthy and you want to give me a 5th or 4th rounder for him, great.
Peter, Detroit, to my mind, Detroit is a big seller, and they've got a lot to sell. Craig Custance just wrote in The Athletic the top 20 targets for the trade deadline, and the Red Wings players are all over it, from depth defensemen guys like Jensen and a veteran guy like Nicholas Kronwall to Trevor Daley, who was on a 1-year deal, to Thomas Vanek, to Gustav Nyquist, or UFAs. I mean, you're not going to get like first-round picks for these guys, but you can pile up the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round picks, enough to and do a good scouting job and replenish the organization. I think Detroit's, they're 10, 11 points out of a wild card spot. They're not making a run here. So I mean, I think that they have to move. Kenny Holland has to move these guys.
I think Detroit's going to make a few. Again, we're all sort of sitting here and going, what do they make? But there's nothing wrong with acquiring draft picks if you're doing it for the right reasons and not because that's your only option. You've got to find a way. I mean, the Red Wings are the top of the list in cap hell.
Right.
Their actual projected cap hit is $87 million, but they're free from LTIR. I mean, they've got a whole bunch of, guys coming off next year, like Howard, Nyquist.
Yeah, I didn't mention Howard's going to get dealt. Howard's going to get dealt.
And Cronwall as well. And then, some lower guys too. They're going to get some freedom from this. But, someone like Vanek has a no trade clause. But, I mean, if someone asked about him, I'm sure he'd be open to it to take another cup run, because that's what Vanek does every spring. He gets moved. And there's some things to move. I think the interesting one is would they ask Nyquist to move his his
Limited.
no trade clause. 10 goals,
Yeah.
26 assists. He's doing something. He's 29. Someone would probably love to pay. He's probably worth at least a second rounder.
Well, think about this. I mean, I just looked it up because I wasn't sure. So Mike Green's got 1 year left. He's got a modified no trade, but he's got 16 points. He's a plus 10 on a bad team.
But he's been injured again this year, Russ.
But he's playing. Yeah, I know.
Now.
He's on the IR right now.
He's on the IR now, but he's close to coming back.
Right.
I'd trade him. Trade him.
Yeah, but I thought remember they were going to trade him at the deadline last year. He got hurt right before the deadline. Nobody wanted to take a risk on him. They signed him to a 2-year deal. I mean, if their intent was to trade him, they would have signed him to a 1-year deal. Maybe that was the condition of him coming back, was giving him 2 years. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's an offensive defenseman, but he's getting to the point where he's broken down a couple years in a row. And I don't know, I'm not sure how much he's got left. And if he has something left, I'm not sure if he can stay in the lineup. It's sort of like Adam McQuaid. It's like teams looking for tough defensemen. He can provide that, but he can't stay in the lineup. He keeps getting hurt all the time. I think New Jersey is going to be a seller, but I don't know what they really have to sell other than a couple.
Keith Kincaid.
Yeah. Yeah, that probably is it. I mean,
that's their best asset to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We talked about the Rangers, and we've talked about Florida before. I mean, I think they've already started to sell by the moving of Petrovic and the moving of Hutchinson. The interesting one, and again, this was brought up on Saturday Night Headlines and Hockey Night in Canada with the Carolina Hurricanes. We know that they're loaded on the right side of their D, and I wrote about it yesterday. The name of Dougie Hamilton has come up. And this is the thing that's curious. If you look at just pure statistics, you would think that a lot of teams would want Dougie Hamilton. He scored over 40 points. He scored 50 once, but scored 40 points or more the last 3 seasons. He's having a bad year this year with the Hurricanes, only 13 points in 40 games. He's a big right-hand shot defenseman. He's making a reasonable salary for somebody who scores that much, but 5.75 for another couple years. But the question has to be asked. He was drafted by Boston. They traded him to Calgary. Now they've traded him to Carolina. This would be the 4th team. What's wrong with this guy? And that's the thing. It's like, great.
I think it's just because he's an oddball, like we've said it. And so maybe he's having trouble fitting in. I think he fits in with the players in Carolina. I just think the numbers aren't there. But the numbers aren't there for a lot of players in Carolina. Like, right? It's not just him. What is Justin Falk's numbers? I haven't even looked at them in weeks.
Yeah, I don't know what his offensive numbers are. But
Dougie Hamilton's numbers, his underlying numbers, are perfectly fine.
Right.
Everything that drives play is going well for him. And if you actually look at him with, anyone who's a minimum of 500 minutes on ice, he really stands out. He's actually
talk about a drop-off. Justin Falk went from 49 points in 15 to 37, 31, and so far he's got 15.
So he's on a pace for 30 points right now.
Yeah. The other thing with Dougie Hamilton is he's a bit of a victim of shooting percentage. When he's on the ice, the Canes are only shooting 5.3%. So he's basically 3 points underwater of league average, historical league average. So there's something going on there from a points thing, but it could just be a little bit of luck. Like, I don't doubt that, let's use the term oddball. I don't doubt that maybe he is a little bit that way. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason.
Well, he's a very smart guy, and I think sometimes he might be on a different level as far as just what he finds funny
and that's fine. But you know what? That also speaks to leadership on the team.
Sure.
You've got to being a leader on a team, and it isn't all about putting up points and stuff. You've got to work with guys. You've got to say, I'm a veteran in this league. How do I get this guy in the fold? How do we make it? How do I get other guys to understand him too?
Right.
It's just like being the office manager or the team leader in your work environment. You still have things away from the actual skilled tasks that you're paid money to do. You still have to do other things. That's what these guys need to do. Look, as far as I'm concerned, from on ice stuff, Dougie Hamilton can play on the Jets any day. And you know what? Let's trade him Truba, who's going to be you. Let's just swap it out and off you go.
And before people jump on Hamilton, which again I think they are, Jacob Slavin's a -14 with 15 points. He is tanked since he's gotten that contract.
Well, it's a product of the fact that the team can't score.
Right. That's my basic point. Is it's taxed all the defensemen. So Hamilton's like we said, the numbers don't look great, but like Peter said, the underlying numbers don't look bad. And I watched him play, and he could still skate and he could still play.
Yeah, of the 6D who have played on Carolina more than 500 minutes, there's no one underwater on possession. They're all actually insanely good.
Right. They just can't finish.
Can't finish. And you know what? And that's on ice, right? So that's when you're on the ice. So that's that you rise and sink all together with that stat.
Mm-hmm.
You need to trade someone and get someone on there who can finish. You got rid of Skinner. You got rid of
Lindholm.
What's his face? Lindholm. So you everything works well with the skill set of that team, except putting the puck in the net.
So can we bring up a team that really isn't going to be a seller, but I got to mention a player. So the other day when the Flyers played Calgary, it doesn't mean Calgary won't make a trade, right? They'll probably make a trade with somebody. So here's what I noticed. I spoke to Michael Frolik. I was the only one that spoke to Michael Frolik. I want to tell people I have not been paid by Alan Walsh. He has not gotten to me. I just want to point that out. Anyhow.
I've been blocked by Alan Walsh, so thank you, Alan. I appreciate it. I don't have to see stupid tweets.
You know, I don't harbor any resentment towards a player, no matter who his agent is. I've known Frolik since his draft year, and this is the interesting thing. Bill Peters is underutilizing him. He is not playing him a lot. Right. He's only averaging 12 minutes of ice time on the season. The game I saw him in Philly, he only played him 11, and yet the guy has 9 goals. His shooting percentage is off the charts. It's like 18.8. It's crazy. Michael Frolik probably needs to find a better role on that team, because think about anybody else who has a guy who plays 11 minutes in the league with 9 goals.
Well, Russ, you know where he probably will go, because they always give a second look at somebody. He'll probably go back to Chicago. He was in Chicago before. He'll go back to Chicago.
Yeah, and it's a +8. You know, like he did everything well in that game. He just didn't get enough opportunity, and I think that's what the problem has been for him. Anyhow, go ahead.
So the line of demarcation, I think, is firmly set in the East, because right now all the teams that we just talked about are as much as 7 up to 15 points behind the wild card team. The only team right now that is outside the playoffs looking in that is within a reasonable distance is Montreal, 1 point behind Buffalo. Carolina is at 4. So there's a 6-point gap between Montreal and Carolina, and the rest of them go down. So, right. I mean, if it stays like that, that's a river as wide as the Niagara.
I do think Carolina could do this if they got like a month's worth of good goaltending, if that's possible.
Right, but they're not gonna get that based on what they already have, and they're not gonna score.
It's really frustrating. If I were a Hurricanes fan, I would be so frustrated because of that.
And the talk is that they're going to probably deal Furland before the deadline too, who's one of the biggest.
He's not re-signing with them.
Now going to the West, St. Louis. St. Louis is a definite seller, but again, it's a question of how much they're going to sell. The name that's popped up in recent days has been Braden Shen. Now, Braden Shen's got another year at $5.12 million. Can play center and can play wing. I know that.
He is better as a winger, honestly. He is.
I know that Jimmy Murphy out of Boston was reporting some rumor between the Bruins and the Blues, and if he went to the Bruins, he'd probably play third line center, because that appears to be a need. But I don't know the validity of that rumor. I mean, it makes sense, because I think the Bruins are looking to strengthen up the middle past Bergeron and Krejci, maybe get some size up the middle, and maybe Shen can do that. But again, Russ, the question is, and Peter too, the question is, how much will St. Louis sell? Because, I mean, it's one thing that you trade Shen. It's one thing you trade your pending UFAs like Patrick Maroon. But the guys that a lot of teams want are Parayko and Pietrangelo. And will they move them, or will they not move them?
The funny thing about Braden Shen is he's just good enough of a skater to stay in the league, but he has great hands. There's no question.
Yeah.
Last year, he had 20 even strength goals, which was the exact opposite of when he was on the Flyers playing in the slot. And he had 17 power play goals. So now this year, you look at him and he's got 2 power play goals. I don't even know how that's possible for him, because the year before on the Flyers, he had 11. The year before that, he had 7. He should at least have 10 power play goals by now, and he doesn't. He has 2. So that's kind of crazy. Last year, he only had 8. So I think that shows to the failing of him a little bit and the St. Louis power play. He's got 6 even strength goals on the year. He's got 23 points. Unfortunately, his value is down.
Yeah. Now, Peter, St. Louis is 9 points out of the wild card. They're 12 points behind Colorado for third place. I think it's safe to say, barring like a 20-game winning streak, that they're out of it. But again, it's unknown what Doug Armstrong is going to do, because I think he can put up Pietrangelo or Parayko and say, okay, make your best offer and get a real big return. But it's just a question of whether he wants to move those guys or not. So,
I mean, someone would have to come in and really blow his mind to get rid of Tarasenko and to probably get rid of Parayko. Like, you'd really have to be super desperate and offering a lot, because it's just a lot to make happen at the deadline and then plan for later. And when I look at teams, I think, who are going to be trying to acquire, I can think of maybe one. The Leafs certainly in the East have the ability to go all in and figure some cap stuff out later. Yeah. Like I think they do. They're just like the Jets. They have impending stuff coming, but I think they could go all in and say, we know a sacrifice is coming later. We just don't know what it is. Correct. So they do that. I think the Jets could do that too. But the sacrifice is bigger for the Jets based on some contracts where they are comparatively, but not different. Just a different sort of shuffling of deck chairs to make things work if you're to do that. I just don't think it's to the Blues' advantage to take an offer then that they could get closer to the draft or free agency period, where there's a little more mobility, probably a few more players in the market,
right?
And go from there. I mean, I think if you're Carolina and you need scoring, Tarasenko is a guy you got to look at, because once you see the contract that Nylander got, and you know what Marner's going to get, and you know Laine, Connor are going to get big bucks, and Matthews too,
and Rantanen
and Rantanen and all those guys, 7.5 is actually not a bad deal.
No,
and given the defense they have and what they can do with the game, he's the kind of guy with your other assets that could be incredibly valuable. And you're going to have to, and Tom Dundon's going to have to accept the fact that 7.5 is a decent rate to be locked up at, as opposed to going into 8 or 9 to get the same thing.
Russ, the question I have about Pietrangelo, and I know that the situations are not the same, because there was definitely an impetus in Ottawa to move Karlsson, but you look at what supposedly the Senators were offered for Karlsson before the deadline, last deadline, and what they ended up trading him during the summer or right before the season. And I would think that that's similar to what Pietrangelo will draw in a trade before the deadline this year, with a playoff and another year, as opposed to basically, him going into at the them trading him before the draft, him having 1 year, and more than likely, if he's going into the final year, he's going free agent. He has a chance to make, $9 million in free agency. So I would think if they don't know if they're going to sign him or not, it would make more sense for them to trade him before February 25th.
I do think they could sign him, and that's why I think Parayko, for other reasons, which maybe I'll get a better handle on tonight when the Flyers play him, seem to be the guy on the block. But I want to go back to Tarasenko for a minute, because if I'm trading Tarasenko to Carolina, I'm asking for a Jake Bean, Teravainen, a first and a second. That's what I want.
I mean, I would ask for Bean. I'd ask for Neckish.
Yeah, you'll ask for Neckish, but they won't do it.
Yeah,
I'm telling you what I would accept, and that's what I would accept.
But see, what you look from the Carolina perspective, how does that help you? I mean, Tarasenko's a better scorer than Teravainen, but
they got a sniper. That's all they care about, Mike.
Yeah, but they're giving up, and I'm not saying Teravainen's a sniper, but he's a scorer. So you need levels of scoring. You just can't give one for the other.
No, but here's what I want to say about Tarasenko, and I would hold on to him like grim death. He'll only be 28 next year. You're talking about a guy the last 5 years, 37, 40, 39, 33 goals. Now, this year, his shots are down. He's a minus because it's a bad team. Everything is down. You go look at every player. Peter Angelo only has 18 points. When things are bad, things are bad. So this will be a bad year for Tarasenko. He'll end up with like 43, 44 points.
Yeah.
He'll end up with 20-something goals, and it'll be a little blip on the radar. But when you start off next year, if your lineup is better and you have him playing with Fabry and Jaden Schwartz or something, his goals will be back up to 35, 40 goals. There's nobody in their system that can replace him, and there's nobody they can get via trade that could replace those goals. That's why you have to get 2 players and some picks.
Now, the picture in the West is remarkably different, and that's why the number of sellers in the West are going to be down. I would say maybe 2 right now at this point. I'd say 2, maybe 3 teams are sellers, because St. Louis, we just talked about. LA, the thing with LA, I mean, according to Craig Custance' article, he mentions Jake Muzzin. I'm assuming Martinez would probably be possible there. I mean, they're looking to shed salary, so it could be some of these long-term guys. Maybe Kovalchuk if there's a fit out there, but I don't know if it would take a guy over 35 making $6.25 million for another 2 years. But I think LA is of the mindset that yes, we're going to sell. It's just a question of how much and what we can do. But after that, even Chicago is only 6 points out of the wild card.
Yeah.
Maybe they trade some players, but Arizona's 6 points. Edmonton, Minnesota, Vancouver, unless they really tank in the next 4 or 5 weeks, I don't think they're selling.
Here's what I do. If I'm LA, I'm offering up Kovalchuk for Teravainen and a pick, because Teravainen, even without Jeff Skinner, has 34 points. That's amazing, because he had 64 last year. This guy is starting to reach his peak. He's at a reasonable salary, and if you could unload Kovalchuk because you got a team that wants a sniper,
Russ,
take that player.
Don Waddell is the general manager in Carolina, and I think
he might take that trade. Yeah.
Yeah, but from what I remember, him and Kovalchuk didn't.
It doesn't matter, Mike. I mean, this is
will
override that. If the owner believes in Kovalchuk, he will override Don Waddell. It won't matter.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that Peter, that would be one that would be hard to imagine for Koval. I mean,
listen, Vinny Prospal went back to John Tortorella. It was bad.
But again, you're giving up. I mean, you're giving up Teravainen, who I know is going to hit some sort of payday next year, and maybe that will be a factor with Dundon, because Dundon, I think, has the reputation of being fiscally restrained. And that's being kind. But
yeah, so I got a printer going off here beside me, but I think Tom Dundon's going to come to the realization that a few other owners have, is that once you hit the point of having prospects and stability, you have to start dealing with your roster in its holes, and you can't keep waiting forever. And, the Jets were a bottom team, and they're still a bottom team in terms of salary right now and expenditures, but that's changing. Sure. And they show that with the league's smallest building, Canadian dollar, you can still go ahead and do things. But there's one statistic that no one talks about. You look at Stanley Cup champions and where they were with the cap, they're all in the top. You don't get by without spending. You just don't. Because the one thing the NHL does, it gets a lot of contracts wrong, but it gets most of them right in terms of having the right talent being paid. And eventually those teams start winning more.
Now, short of,
I do want to say this one last thing. I don't want to do a commercial for the Winnipeg Jets, but like, some teams have owners, and a guy's, a good businessman, but he doesn't know hockey. He's just, he relies on other people. Mark Chipman is not only a good businessman, but he's a good hockey business person. And that is why he's been able to make the Jets such a success with the smallest building. Just think about that for a minute. Like Peter said, it's an easy thing to say, yeah, they have the smallest building, and yeah, they got to deal with the Canadian dollar. You deal that blow to Florida, they'd already be out of business. If Florida wasn't getting paid from the township, it'd be in trouble.
Short of Arizona flipping a guy like Yarmulson, who they just signed to an extension, I don't see what they sell off that team. The young guys they want to keep, and I don't think the desire for like Richard Panik is really a big one out there. So I don't know where Chaika would go if they are sellers. The 3 teams that are on the outside looking in, I think could be marginal buyers and marginal sellers, like most teams in the middle of the pack are. And Edmonton, I mean, what have they lost? 7 of their last 8. I know they beat Anaheim on Sunday, but they're still reeling. The magic of Hitchcock is worn off. And I know that Custance referenced Jesse Puljujarvi as somebody that it sounds like, Russ, because it's been mentioned in more than a few places that they're willing to move him because I think they realize that he's never going to hit there. I think that's pretty short-sighted because I think he still has a lot of talent, and there's a potential that they could get robbed in a deal, but it appears that might be the price that they're willing to pay to maybe upgrade their defense.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't do it, but can you get somebody? Yes, you can get somebody. I do find a player. I do have a player, Mike, that Arizona can trade.
Okay.
Alex Goligoski. Because if you look at him, after this year, which clearly they're not making the playoffs, he's got 2 more years left, and a modified no trade kicks in after this year, and it's a no move right now. So you're going to have to get him to agree to it.
Right.
But next year, would it be easier to trade him? Sure, but you're not going anywhere this year. If someone could get Alex Goligoski at the trade deadline, you could actually get at least 1 or 2 pieces you could use in your lineup today.
Maybe back to Dallas where he was before.
It's possible, but that's what I would do. As far as Puljujarvi, he has value, but it's not as high as it could be. I mean,
they've done their best to knock down his value, by yo-yoing him back between Bakersfield and Edmonton. I mean, they really haven't developed him well, so it's a reclamation project basically.
So let's say you're trading him to, I don't know, the Minnesota Wild, and the Minnesota Wild say, hey, you know what? We'll give you Nino Niederreiter for him. They might do it. And you know what? And Minnesota saves on salary.
Right.
They get a younger player who they believe they could put with some veterans and get some high-end work out of, and they're fine. Or they can give an extra one of their defensemen because they still have other guys that might entice Edmonton. But you know what? I think they would do Niederreiter for Puljujarvi. I do.
Yeah, and Niederreiter is another name that's been out there.
Peter?
And that kind of trade would open up cap space for Minnesota, which I think
would.
Yeah, I'm just curious if because that'd be a big move for Minnesota, and simply because this year he's not playing. I don't know. It's funny, right? Like, he's on pace for basically 15 goals, which would be his lowest in 5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
He's making $5 million, I believe.
He's making $5 million. I mean, is this the buy low kind of thing? Man, that's an interesting one. I hadn't actually heard that before. And
that's why I said if Paul Fenton makes the trade, he has to credit me.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So he goes to the desert because that's where all salaries go to. Or you're saying for Puljujarvi?
Yeah, no, Edmonton. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's for Edmonton.
Well, I mean, Edmonton's desperate for wings.
Well, it could be the desert of hockey, but not the desert in.
Yeah,
it's a desert of hockey management. We know that. Okay, the other team is Vancouver, and Vancouver dodged a bullet because the injury to Pettersson doesn't seem serious. He had an MRI done in the weekend. It's, I believe, a mild sprain of a ligament in his knee, and I think they said the prognosis was a week or 2. So he might actually be back in time for the All-Star game, which is that's a relief. Yeah. They're a point behind Anaheim right now and for the wild card. And the question with Vancouver is, I mean, if Pettersson was out, then I think that the talk of maybe moving a Edler or a Tanev would pop up again. But they're talking now about extending Edler.
Exactly.
Now, Peter, the Canucks scene. Does that mean if they're extending Edler, does that mean they're moving Tanev, or do you think they're just keeping things status quo?
Tanev's been playing better in the last few games, but there's some criticism about him. It's a curious situation in Vancouver. I mean, you've got the owner saying we're good, but we don't want to be good in his mixed message tweets. You got all these weird messages coming out of the team and management. It's hard to know what they want. I think they had a lot of belief in Pettersson coming over. I don't think anyone really saw what he's doing coming to this level. So they're sitting there going, what do we do? And I think what'll happen is the competitiveness of Francesco Aquilini will get the better of him, and he will start thinking they should try and hold on and make the playoffs. It's probably not the right move.
That far. I don't know.
It's probably not the right move, but
maybe they'll buy and sell at the same time.
I think that's what they'll do.
Yeah, it could be interesting. I mean, I haven't looked at where Edler's sitting in terms of his stats, what his numbers are and stuff like that. But he's the kind of guy who I'd love to see the Jets make a play for, because he'd be a great number 2D behind Morrissey on the left side, and he's an expiring contract. He'd probably cost you, I don't know, a second, maybe.
He's got 19 points in 30 games.
I think Benning would take a prospect. He would not take a pick.
Yeah. So the Jets have some prospects they could shoot his way. I don't think that's a problem for them. It's interesting. I mean, last year, 19 points. Last year, 6 goals, 34 points in 70 games. 30 games. So, he's half a point a game guy.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad for defense, and considering what the Canucks offense is like, that's interesting. Put him on the Jets, it might be interesting.
Will you give me Logan Stanley for him?
I would, but I don't. Chevy won't.
I don't know if he won't. I'll tell you who I'll accept. I'll accept Logan Stanley. I'll accept
Brendan Lemieux.
Huh?
Brendan Lemieux.
You can have Brendan Lemieux.
No. Brendan Lemieux is valuable for them now. He's actually scoring goals. I will take either Logan Stanley or Matthew Thiessen, the goalie.
Ooh. I don't know about that.
You have Hellebuck. Why you want?
I don't know about. Yeah, I don't know much about Thiessen. I think the guy they might. You know what you could probably have is Michael Spacek. You could definitely have Marco Dano.
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, we'll take a couple questions in the chat before we end the show.
And you know what? I don't know if he'd be interested, but CJ Seiss, it's not Seuss, it's Seiss, might be of interest too.
Okay, or Santeri Virtanen and a pick is fine too, because Virtanen looked pretty good in the World Juniors.
Yeah, that would be possibly too, but I don't think they're going to give that up for a rental, Russ.
Yeah, but listen, this could win them the Stanley Cup.
No, they need one more player to do that.
But that's not the point. That's not the pitch.
Well, okay. Let me just float this, because Anaheim is in a death spiral right now. 2-6-2 in the last 8 games, or in the last 10 games, excuse me. They're barely holding on to the wild card spot. They have a minus 23 differential. They've only scored 104 goals, and they're still in the playoffs, which is amazing. I mean, they need offense badly, but they have Silfverberg, who's a UFA. I don't know if I can see them moving him, because Silfverberg actually can score, but I think they have to find a way that they may be in that buy-sell avenue, Russ, where they're looking for scoring, but they may move Silfverberg if they're not going to sign him.
That's a team. You want to trade for Matt Zuccarello? That's the team.
Yeah, I mean, but can Matt Zuccarello score enough to really help them out? You've
seen him. I mean, if you put him with the right guys, he definitely can, and he's very underrated on the power play. Even if he's on your second power play, he's really good with puck distribution. I think they could make a trade with the Rangers for Matt Zuccarello. That's who I would look at for them, because they do. They've gotten young talent and thrown him in. We know that the trade with Pittsburgh has worked out really well. But now we need a veteran too that could do that. Because again, they're like a mix. They're a weird mix right now, Anaheim. And I thought last year was their year, but they do still have a chance. Although Minnesota has 3 games in hand on them and only 2 points down, so I don't know if that chance is great.
Right. But they're within striking distance of third. I mean, they're 8 points. That's a little on the outside. I mean, the top 3 in the Pacific are starting to run away with it. Calgary, Vegas, 56 points. San Jose at 53. So, I mean, it's probably going to be the wild card for Anaheim. We'll talk about the buyers tomorrow. So we did the sellers. Russ, any questions in the chat?
Let me see. Questions. Well, here's one from Lance Norman. Hey, Russ, does Canada's early exit in the World Juniors hurt Canadians in the draft or help others move? No. These things, the only thing that could ever happen to you in a World Juniors is that you move up. Very rarely does anybody ever move down from a World Juniors, because a lot of times a player's put into a situation that they're not normally going to be put in, but they're on a team that they, played with some of these guys they haven't. It's like an all-star team. And so they become a team player, and they play whatever role that team wants them to. Even Jack Hughes was playing hurt and still scoring points, so nothing hurt him. Capo Keiko, I'm sure ISS will put him number 1 in their next ranking.
Yeah.
But he's not. Everybody's going to go Jack Hughes first. So, no, I don't think it really affects anybody. All right, let's see. Mike Doyle's asking, hey, Russ, can you ask Peter if he's been to the snow maze in Winnipeg?
I haven't been to the snow maze yet, but I've heard it's decent, but I haven't been yet.
Okay. Esmir asked, could you see the Canucks look at Kincaid as a goalie option if they make a push for the playoffs? Sure. If they delude themselves into thinking they're in it, Heath Kincaid would be a good option, because then, you let him expire next year. Demko's still on track. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Markstrom has played really well like the last month or 6 weeks.
Yeah, Markstrom's fine.
He was not good against Toronto on Saturday, but they were at the end of a 6-game road trip, so maybe I'll cut him some slack on that one.
Yeah. Drew asks, why can't Hamilton stay put? Honestly, I think he is staying put. I honestly think the team is just trying to give him that little push that sometimes teams do to players to light a fire under them. I think that's all that's going on here.
Yeah, but they do have 4 right-hand shot defensemen.
I know, but it doesn't mean he's the guy.
No, it could be Pesci. It could be. I mean, remember, Falk has only a year left on his deal, and his name was out there over the summer. So I think the thing is that people see the total package in Hamilton: size, offensive ability, skating, cost certainty on the contract, 2 more years at $5.75. With Falk, ages, he's a little older, he's smaller, his numbers are dropping. There's concerns, you probably are not getting as much for Falk as you are for Hamilton.
Yeah. Drew earlier asked, what about, Shane Gostisbehere when we were talking about the trade stuff? I honestly don't think he's getting moved now, because now that Andrew McDonald is sort of like useless again, he's pretty useless. You probably then are probably keeping Gudis. You might still bring up Myers. Folin was a 1-year deal, so he's probably gone. Now maybe Fletcher likes him from his Minnesota days and re-signs him. But that defense would be awfully thin without Shane Gostisbehere, even with Myers coming in. They would have to go and get somebody, or get somebody in the trade. That makes it harder. So I think now, with everything the way it's sort of turned around, I think Gostisbehere might be safe. Let's see. All right. There's always this talk, and there was on the boards too, about Lundqvist going somewhere. At the end of the day, he holds the hammer. He lives in New York. He likes New York. He likes the coach. The coach likes him. They're not going to be rebuilding for the next 3-4 years. So I just think that will end quickly.
Okay, good show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Lagello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.